She thought she was there to cook. Instead, she became the center of a rural empire, without even trying. Because some men can buy land, cattle, machines, but when they fall in love, they don't know what to do with their hands. So they try to control what can't be controlled. The result? A romance so intense even the wind feels like it's gossiping. The morning sun cast long shadows across the winding dirt road as Chloe Harrington clutched her worn duffel bag against her chest, watching the sprawling landscape unfold before her. Endless fields stretched toward the horizon, interrupted only by white fences that seemed to go on forever. She had never seen so much land belonging to one person. The truck driver who had given her a lift from town nodded toward a massive oak tree in the distance. That's where the main house starts. Callahan property. You sure you got a job there, miss? Chloe swallowed hard, fingers tightening around the folded letter in her coat pocket. The job offer had come through a friend of her mother's, a simple position as a cook on one of the largest ranches in the state. It was more money than she had ever made, enough to help her family back home and maybe, just maybe, save something for herself. Yes, I'm sure, she said, though her voice wavered slightly. The driver gave her a skeptical look, but said nothing more as he pulled up to the main gate. A security guard emerged from a small booth, checking his clipboard before waving them through. Chloe's heart hammered as they drove down a tree-lined avenue that seemed to stretch for miles. When the main house finally came into view, she nearly gasped. It was nothing like she had imagined. The sprawling ranch-style mansion sat like a crown atop a gentle hill, surrounded by manicured gardens that contrasted sharply with the wild beauty of the surrounding countryside. Horses grazed in nearby paddocks, their coats gleaming in the morning light. "Good luck," the driver said as she climbed out, and there was something in his tone that made her stomach flutter with nervousness. Chloe stood alone on the gravel driveway, her small bag feeling even more inadequate now. She was early, almost an hour before she was supposed to report to the kitchen manager. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of hay and something sweet she couldn't quite identify. If this story is touching your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion. She was so absorbed in taking in her surroundings that she didn't hear the footsteps behind her until a deep voice made her jump. "You're the new cook." It wasn't a question. Chloe spun around and found herself looking up, way up, at the most imposing man she had ever seen. He stood at least 6'3" with broad shoulders that seemed to block out the sun. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it, and his eyes were an intense shade of brown that seemed to look straight through her. He was dressed simply in jeans and a dark blue work shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing tanned, muscular forearms. His hands were large and calloused, the hands of a man who worked with them despite his obvious wealth. There was something raw and powerful about his presence that made her feel suddenly very small. Yes, Chloe managed, her voice coming out smaller than she intended. "I'm Chloe Harrington. I was told to report to Mrs. Patterson in the kitchen at 8. The man's eyes swept over her, taking in every detail with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. His gaze lingered on her face, and she noticed the way his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm Ethan Callahan," he said, and the pieces clicked into place. This was him, the owner of everything she could see, the man whose reputation for ruthless business dealings had reached even her small hometown. "You're early." "I apologize, Mr. Callahan. The driver who brought me made good time, and I thought—" "I didn't say it was a problem." His voice was gruff, but there was something else underneath it, something she couldn't quite identify. He continued to stare at her in a way that should have been uncomfortable, but instead sent a strange warmth spreading through her chest. Chloe shifted her weight, unsure what to do under such scrutiny. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the slight stubble on his strong jaw. He had to be in his late 30s, maybe 40, but there was a vitality about him that made age irrelevant. "Mrs. Patterson is already in the kitchen," Ethan said finally, though he made no move to leave or direct her where to go. "But you can wait in the front garden. There are benches near the fountain." "Thank you, Mr. Callahan." She expected him to walk away then, to return to whatever important business had brought him outside so early. Instead, he stood there, hands slowly curling into fists at his sides, as if he were restraining himself from something. The silence stretched between them, heavy with something Chloe couldn't name. "Where are you from?" he asked abruptly. "Millbrook. It's a small town about 60 miles east of here." "I know where Millbrook is." His eyes hadn't left her face. "What made you want to work here?" The question seemed innocent enough, but the way he asked it with such focused intensity made it feel like her answer mattered more than it should. Chloe tucked a strand of her light brown hair behind her ear, a nervous gesture she had never been able to break. "I needed work, and this job pays well," she said honestly. "My family needs help, and I'm good at what I do." Mrs. Patterson said she was looking for someone who could handle country cooking for a large household. Something flickered in Ethan's expression. Approval, perhaps, or respect for her straightforwardness. He nodded slowly, his gaze finally dropping from her face to the bag she still clutched. "That all you brought?" "I travel light." She tried to smile, but his continued scrutiny was making her increasingly nervous. "I didn't know if I would have much space." "You'll have your own room in the staff quarters." He paused, then added, "But if you need anything, you tell Mrs. Patterson, or you tell me directly." Before Chloe could respond, a woman's voice called out from the direction of the house. An older woman with iron-grey hair and a kind face was waving from the porch. "That's Mrs. Patterson," Ethan said unnecessarily. He took a step back, creating distance between them, but his eyes remained locked on hers. "She'll show you everything you need to know." "Thank you, Mr. Callahan." "Ethan," he corrected, and the way he said his own name, low and rough, did something strange to her pulse. "Just Ethan when it's not business." He turned and walked away then, his long strides carrying him toward the stables in the distance. But Chloe could swear she felt his gaze on her back as she made her way toward the house, and when she glanced over her shoulder, she saw that she was right. He had stopped near the stable entrance and was watching her, one hand braced against the wooden doorframe, his expression unreadable, even from this distance. "Mrs. Patterson greeted her warmly, chattering about the kitchen and the household routine. But Chloe only half listened. Her mind was still on those intense brown eyes and the way they had seemed to see right into her soul, searching for something she wasn't sure she understood. What she didn't know was that back at the stables, Ethan Callahan was standing perfectly still, his heart pounding in a way it never had before, trying to understand why the sight of one small, brown-haired woman had just turned his entire world upside down. The kitchen was everything Chloe had hoped for and more, spacious and bright, with windows that overlooked the gardens. It had been recently renovated with professional-grade equipment that made her fingers itch to start cooking. Mrs. Patterson, the head housekeeper, had a warm smile that immediately put Chloe at ease, though the older woman's eyes held a shrewdness that suggested she missed very little. "You'll be responsible for all meals for Mr. Callahan and any guests he might have," Mrs. Patterson explained, showing her the massive refrigerator stocked with fresh ingredients. "He's particular about quality, but not fussy about fancy presentations. Likes good, honest food made well." Chloe nodded, running her hand along the smooth marble countertop. "What about the other staff?" "There's a separate dining area for them, but you're not responsible for that. We have Maria, who handles those meals." Mrs. Patterson paused, studying Chloe with those sharp eyes. "Mr. Callahan specifically requested someone who could cook the way his grandmother used to. Comfort food, he called it. Real food." Something about the way she emphasized those words made Chloe glance up. Mrs. Patterson was watching her with an expression that seemed almost knowing, though what she could possibly know after only an hour of Chloe being there was a mystery. The morning passed in a blur of learning where everything was stored, understanding the household routine, and planning the week's menus. Chloe discovered that Ethan typically took breakfast at 6, lunch was flexible depending on his schedule, and dinner was always at 7 sharp unless he was away on business. "He's here most days," Mrs. Patterson said, pulling out a stack of recipe cards. "Ever since his grandmother passed 3 years ago, he doesn't travel much, handles most business from the estate office." She hesitated, then added softly, "He's been different since she died. Quieter. More focused on work and less on everything else." Chloe absorbed this information, filing it away as she examined the recipe cards. They were handwritten in elegant cursive, clearly old family recipes passed down through generations. Pot roast, apple pie, chicken and dumplings, the kind of food that spoke of home and love and Sunday dinners. "His grandmother wrote these," Mrs. Patterson confirmed. "He guards them like treasure. The fact that he's letting you use them—" She trailed off meaningfully. Before Chloe could ask what she meant, the kitchen door swung open. Her heart jumped into her throat when Ethan stepped inside, filling the doorway with his presence. He was dressed differently now, in dark slacks and a white button-down shirt that emphasized his broad shoulders, clearly ready for business meetings. But his hair was still slightly disheveled, and his tie hung loose around his neck as if he had forgotten to finish knotting it. "Mrs. Patterson, I need you to reschedule my 2 o'clock with Henderson," he said, his eyes flickering to Chloe before returning to the housekeeper. "Push it to tomorrow." "Of course, Mr. Callahan." Mrs. Patterson excused herself with a knowing smile that made Chloe's cheeks warm. Suddenly alone with him in the vast kitchen, Chloe felt the air grow thick. Ethan made no move to leave. Instead, he walked slowly toward the counter where she stood, his gaze fixed on her with that same unsettling intensity from the morning. "Settling in?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes, thank you. Mrs. Patterson has been very helpful." He nodded, but he was barely listening to his own question. His eyes traced the curve of her cheek, the way afternoon light from the window caught in her hair. Chloe shifted uncomfortably under such scrutiny, her hands twisting the dish towel she had been holding. "What are you making for dinner?" The question was casual, but the way he asked it, as if her answer was the most important thing in the world, was anything but. "I was thinking of trying your grandmother's pot roast recipe," Chloe said softly, "if that's acceptable." Something fierce and painful flashed across Ethan's face. His jaw clenched, and for a moment she thought she had said something wrong. Then he took a step closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, cedar and something spicy that made her pulse quicken. "She would have liked you," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "She would have said you have kind eyes." Chloe didn't know what to say to that. The compliment, delivered in such a raw tone, made her throat tighten. She watched as Ethan reached out, his large hand hovering near her arm as if he wanted to touch her, but was restraining himself. The air between them crackled with something electric. "I should let you work," he said finally, but he didn't move. Instead, his eyes drifted down to her lips, then back up to meet her gaze. The hunger in that look made her breath catch. "Mr. Callahan—" "Ethan," he corrected again, and this time there was almost a plea in his voice. "Please." "Ethan," she whispered, and watched the way his pupils dilated at the sound of his name from her lips. He took a shuddering breath and finally stepped back, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that spoke of frustration and restraint. "I'll be in my office if you need anything at all." He left before she could respond, the door swinging shut behind him with a soft click. Chloe released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her hand pressed against her racing heart. What was that? The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze. Chloe threw herself into preparing dinner, but her mind kept drifting back to those intense brown eyes, to the way Ethan had looked at her, as if she were something precious and rare. She had been looked at by men before, had received her share of attention, but nothing had ever felt like this, so consuming, so overwhelming. When she glanced out the kitchen window, she caught sight of him crossing the yard toward the stables. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were clenched at his sides, and when he paused mid-stride and turned to look directly at the kitchen, directly at her, she felt it like a physical touch. Their eyes met across the distance. Neither looked away. Mrs. Patterson's voice startled her. "He's been watching the kitchen windows all afternoon," the older woman said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "In 30 years of working for this family, I've never seen him like this." "Like what?" Chloe asked, though her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Like a man who's just discovered something he didn't know he needed." Mrs. Patterson patted her shoulder gently. "Be careful with his heart, dear. It's never been given away before, and I suspect once it is, there'll be no getting it back." Chloe turned to look at her, confused and a little frightened by the implications. "Mrs. Patterson, I've only been here a few hours. Time doesn't matter much when it comes to matters of the heart." The older woman smiled sadly. "His grandmother used to say that Callahan men love once and love fierce. When they find the one, they know it instantly." She paused at the doorway, looking back. "She also said it would take an extraordinary woman to handle that kind of intensity." Long after Mrs. Patterson left, Chloe stood at the window, watching as Ethan disappeared into the stables. Her hands trembled slightly as she returned to her work, trying to focus on measuring ingredients and checking temperatures. But she could still feel the ghost of his gaze on her skin, could still see the barely restrained hunger in his eyes. What had she gotten herself into? That evening, when she served dinner in the formal dining room, Ethan sat alone at the head of a table meant for 12. He had changed into casual clothes again, and his hair was still damp from a shower. When she placed the pot roast in front of him, their fingers brushed accidentally. The contact sent electricity shooting up her arm. Ethan's hand closed around her wrist, gentle but firm, holding her there for just a heartbeat too long. When she finally met his eyes, what she saw there made her knees weak. "Thank you, Chloe," he said, and the way he said her name, soft and reverent, felt like a caress. She fled back to the kitchen, her heart pounding, knowing with absolute certainty that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't begin to understand. And when she peeked back into the dining room minutes later, she found him sitting perfectly still, his food untouched, staring at the doorway where she had disappeared with an expression of such longing that it made her chest ache. Mrs. Patterson had been right. Time didn't matter. Something powerful and irrevocable had begun the moment she stepped onto Callahan property, and Chloe had the terrifying feeling that there would be no going back from whatever was about to unfold. 3 days into her new position, Chloe was beginning to understand the pattern. Ethan found reasons to be in the kitchen at least 5 times a day, often during hours when he should have been in meetings or overseeing ranch operations. He would lean against the doorframe, arms crossed over his chest, watching her work with an intensity that made her fingers fumble with whatever she was holding. This morning was no different. She was kneading dough for fresh bread when she felt his presence before she heard him. The air in the kitchen seemed to shift, growing warmer and heavier. When she looked up, he was standing just inside the doorway, still wearing his riding clothes, boots dusty, hair windblown, a sheen of sweat on his tanned skin that suggested he had been working hard. "Don't you have ranch business to attend to?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light despite the way her pulse had started racing. Ethan's lips quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. "This is ranch business. Watching me make bread? Making sure my cook has everything she needs." His eyes tracked the movement of her hands as she worked the dough, and there was something almost hypnotic about his focused attention. "Do you?" "Do I what?" "Have everything you need?" Chloe swallowed hard, pressing her palms into the soft dough. The question felt loaded with meaning she couldn't quite decipher. "Yes, Mr. Cole, Ethan. Everything is fine." He moved then, crossing the kitchen with those long strides, until he stood on the opposite side of the counter from her. This close, she could smell horse and leather and sweat, scents that should have been off-putting, but instead made something low in her belly tighten with awareness. "I noticed you working late last night," he said, and there was a rough edge to his voice. "After dinner service? I was preparing today's meals." She focused intently on the dough, not trusting herself to meet his eyes. "It's easier to do some prep work the night before." "How late?" "I'm sorry? How late were you here?" Each word was measured, controlled, but underneath she sensed something barely restrained. "Maybe 10 o'clock. Why does it matter?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "Because I don't want you walking back to the staff quarters alone that late. The path isn't well lit. I've been managing fine. From now on, you call me when you're ready to leave." His hand came down on the counter between them, not quite slamming but firm enough to make her jump. "I'll walk you back." Chloe finally looked up at him, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. There was concern there, yes, but also something fierce and possessive that sent a shiver down her spine. "That's not necessary. I'm perfectly capable." "I know you're capable." His voice dropped lower, almost a growl. "But it would make me feel better. Please." The "please," added almost as an afterthought, softened the command. Chloe found herself nodding before she could think better of it, and the relief that washed over Ethan's face was so profound it made her chest ache. "Thank you," he said, and there was such genuine gratitude in those 2 words that she couldn't help but smile. They stood there in silence for a long moment, the kitchen filled only with the sound of her hands working the dough and the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Ethan watched every movement, and Chloe was acutely aware of how domestic this felt, him standing there while she baked, as if they were something more than employer and employee. "My grandmother used to make bread every Sunday," Ethan said suddenly, his voice distant with memory. "The whole house would smell like yeast and butter. She said good bread required patience and strong hands." Chloe glanced at her flour-dusted fingers. She was right about both. "You have strong hands." His gaze was fixed on them, and the appreciation in his eyes made heat creep up her neck. Capable hands. I noticed that the first day. What else did you notice? The question slipped out before she could stop it, and she immediately wanted to take it back. But Ethan leaned forward, bracing his hands on the counter, bringing his face closer to hers. The hunger in his expression was unmistakable now, no longer hidden behind polite interest or employer concern. Everything, he said roughly. The way you tuck your hair behind your ear when you're concentrating. How your nose crinkles when you taste something and adjust the seasoning. The little hum you make when you're satisfied with how a dish turns out. Chloe's hand stilled in the dough. You shouldn't be noticing those things. I know. His voice was raw with honesty. I know I shouldn't, but I can't seem to help myself. Before she could respond, the kitchen door burst open and one of the ranch hands, a young man named Tommy, strode in with a friendly smile. Hey Chloe, Mrs. Patterson said you might have some of that coffee cake left from breakfast. He stopped short when he saw Ethan, whose entire demeanor had changed in an instant. The warmth had vanished from his expression, replaced by something cold and dangerous. Ethan straightened to his full height, and Chloe watched in fascination as Tommy actually took a step backward. Tommy, Ethan said, and his voice was like ice. Don't you have fence repairs to finish in the south pasture? Yes, sir, but I thought, then I suggest you get back to them. Now. The dismissal was absolute. Tommy mumbled an apology and fled, leaving Chloe staring at Ethan in shock. The transformation had been so swift, so complete. This was the ruthless businessman she had heard about, the man who had built an empire through sheer force of will and iron determination. But when Ethan turned back to her, some of the hardness had already begun to melt from his features. He ran a hand through his hair, looking almost embarrassed. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have been so harsh with him. Why were you? Chloe asked quietly. Ethan's eyes met hers, and the naked honesty in them stole her breath. Because he was looking at you the way I want to be the only one who looks at you. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and vulnerable. Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs. She should say something, should establish boundaries, should remind him that she worked for him, and this was inappropriate. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she heard herself ask, "And how is that?" Ethan's gaze dropped to her lips, then slowly traveled back up to meet her eyes. Like you're the only thing in the world worth looking at. Chloe's knees went weak. She gripped the edge of the counter for support, flour and dough forgotten. The intensity between them was suffocating, thrilling, terrifying. She wanted to run. She wanted to stay. She wanted to understand why this man affected her so profoundly after only 3 days. I should finish this bread, she whispered. Yes. But Ethan didn't move. Neither did she. They stood there, separated by 3 feet of counter and a chasm of propriety that was rapidly shrinking with each passing second. Chloe could see the war playing out on Ethan's face, restraint battling desire, control fighting need. Finally, with what seemed like enormous effort, he took a step back. I have a conference call in 10 minutes. It sounded like he was reminding himself more than informing her. Of course. He made it all the way to the door before he stopped, his hand on the frame. Without turning around, he said, Chloe? Yes? When you're ready to go back to your room tonight, you call me. No matter how late. Promise me. She should refuse, should insist on her independence, should maintain professional distance. I promise, she heard herself say instead. Ethan's shoulders relaxed fractionally, and then he was gone, leaving Chloe alone with her racing heart and the growing realization that she was in far deeper waters than she had ever imagined. That night, when she finished her prep work at 9:30, she stood in the kitchen for a long time before finally pulling out her phone and sending him a text message. His response was immediate. Stay there. I'm coming. 2 minutes later, Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway, slightly breathless as if he had been running. Their eyes met, and Chloe knew with absolute certainty that whatever was happening between them was far beyond her control to stop. And the most terrifying part was that she wasn't sure she wanted to. The walk from the main house to the staff quarters took less than 5 minutes, but Ethan made it last 15. He walked slowly, deliberately, maintaining a careful distance between them while his hand hovered protectively at the small of her back, never quite touching but close enough that Chloe could feel the heat radiating from his palm. The night was clear and cool, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Their footsteps crunched softly on the gravel path, and somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied. The ranch at night was beautiful in a way that daylight couldn't capture. Quieter, more intimate, full of secrets. "How are you settling in?" Ethan asked, his voice low in the darkness. "Really settling in, I mean. Not the polite answer you give Mrs. Patterson." Chloe glanced at him sideways, surprised by the question and the genuine concern underlying it. "It's been an adjustment," she admitted. "I've never worked anywhere this grand before." "Grand?" He sounded almost amused. "My grandmother would have laughed at that. She always said the house was too big for its own good, that a home should be measured by the love inside it, not the square footage." She sounds like she was wise. "She was the wisest person I've ever known." Ethan's voice roughened with emotion. "She raised me after my parents died when I was 8. Taught me everything that mattered. How to be fair, how to be strong, how to care for the land and the people who depend on it." Chloe heard what he didn't say, that his grandmother had also been his entire world, and losing her had left a void nothing else could fill. "I'm sorry you lost her. She had a good life, a long one." He paused at a fork in the path, and even though Chloe knew the way to her quarters, Ethan guided them toward the longer route without asking. "She always told me that when the right woman came along I'd know instantly. Said Callahan men don't waste time on doubt when it comes to matters of the heart." The statement hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Chloe's pulse quickened. "And have you? Known instantly, I mean." Ethan stopped walking entirely. They stood beneath an old oak tree, its branches creating patterns of shadow and starlight across the ground. When he turned to face her fully, the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Yes," he said simply. "The moment I saw you standing in my driveway with your bag clutched to your chest and uncertainty in your eyes, I knew." "Knew what?" "That my life had just changed." He took a step closer, and Chloe's back pressed against the rough bark of the tree. He wasn't trapping her. She could easily slip away, but she found herself rooted to the spot. "That I was in serious trouble." "Ethan, I know this is insane." His hand came up to brace against the tree trunk beside her head, close enough now that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "I know it's too fast, too intense. I know I should keep my distance and let you settle in and not stand here telling you things that probably terrify you." "Then why are you?" Her voice came out breathless. "Because I've never been good at denying myself what I want." His gaze dropped to her lips. "And because I hope, that I terrify you in the same way you terrify me." Chloe's heart was pounding so hard, she was certain he could hear it. "How do I terrify you?" "You make me want things I've never wanted before." His voice was raw with honesty. "A real home, not just a house. Someone to share breakfast with, to talk to about my day, to hold at night when the darkness feels too heavy." "You make me want to be better than I am." "You don't even know me," she whispered, but her protest sounded weak even to her own ears. "I know enough." His free hand rose slowly, giving her time to pull away, before his fingers brushed against her cheek with a gentleness that contradicted his size and strength. "I know you bite your bottom lip when you're worried. I know you hum old songs while you cook. I know you send half your paycheck home to your family every week, because Mrs. Patterson processes the mail. I know you're kind and hard-working and too beautiful for your own good." His thumb traced the curve of her jaw, and Chloe felt herself melting under his touch. This was madness. She had been here less than a week. She barely knew this man. But when his fingers threaded gently through her hair, and he leaned in close enough that his breath fanned across her lips, nothing else seemed to matter. "Tell me to stop," Ethan murmured, his lips hovering just inches from hers. "Tell me this is too fast, too much. Tell me you don't feel this too, and I'll step back. I'll try to be professional. I'll try to give you space." Chloe's hands had somehow found their way to his chest, feeling the rapid hammer of his heart beneath her palms. She should tell him to stop, should insist on boundaries and propriety and all the sensible things she knew she ought to say. Instead, she heard herself whisper, "What if I don't want you to stop?" The groan that escaped Ethan was pure masculine need. His forehead dropped to rest against hers, his hand tightening in her hair. "Don't say that unless you mean it, Chloe, because once I start, I'm not sure I'll be able to stop wanting you. Not tomorrow, not next week, not ever." The promise, or was it a warning, sent shivers down her spine. But before either of them could close that final distance, voices echoed from somewhere nearby. Ranch hands returning from town, their laughter carrying on the night air. Ethan pulled back immediately, though the reluctance in the movement was evident. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, visibly fighting for control. When he opened them again, the raw hunger had been banked, but not extinguished. "I should get you home," he said, his voice rough, "before I forget every good intention I've ever had." They walked the remaining distance to her quarters in charged silence. At her door, Ethan maintained his careful distance, hands shoved deep in his pockets, as if he didn't trust himself not to reach for her again. "Thank you for walking me back," Chloe managed, her key trembling slightly in her hand. "Every night," Ethan said firmly. "I meant what I said. When you're ready to leave, you call me." "That's not necessary." "It is to me." His eyes bore into hers with such intensity that she felt pinned in place. "Humor me, Chloe. Let me do this one thing to feel like I'm taking care of you." She nodded, unable to form words, and watched as relief flooded his features. He took a step back, then another, but his eyes never left her face. "Sleep well," he said softly. "You too." He turned and walked away, and Chloe watched him go, noting the tension in his shoulders and the way his hands had curled into fists at his sides. She understood what it cost him to walk away, because it was costing her just as much to let him go. Inside her small room, Chloe leaned against the closed door and pressed a hand to her racing heart. This was dangerous. This whole situation was spiraling beyond her control. She was just the cook. He was the owner of everything she could see. The power imbalance alone should have been enough to make her cautious. But when she closed her eyes, all she could see were his, dark and intense, and full of a longing that matched her own. All she could feel was the ghost of his fingers in her hair, the warmth of his breath against her lips, the promise of something she had never experienced before. What was she going to do? Her phone buzzed with a text message. From Ethan. "Just making sure you got inside safely." She smiled despite herself and typed back, "I'm fine, thank you for walking me." His response came immediately. "Anytime. Sleep tight, Chloe." She stared at her phone for a long moment before typing, "Good night, Ethan." As she prepared for bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at the edge of something vast and unknowable, one step away from falling. And the most terrifying part was that she wanted to take that step, wanted to see where this intensity would lead, wanted to discover what it would feel like to be loved by a man like Ethan Callahan. She was in so much trouble, and deep down, in a place she wasn't quite ready to acknowledge, she wouldn't have had it any other way. By the end of her second week, Chloe had established a rhythm to her days, though rhythm was perhaps too gentle a word for the constant awareness of Ethan that thrummed through her veins. He was everywhere, appearing in the kitchen doorway at odd hours, finding reasons to linger over coffee in the morning, materializing whenever she needed to reach something on a high shelf. That last part had become almost comical. Chloe was perfectly capable of using a step stool, but Ethan seemed to have developed a sixth sense for when she was about to climb one. He would appear from nowhere, gently move her aside with a hand at her waist, and retrieve whatever she needed with ease. "I can get it myself," she had protested the third time it happened. "I know you can," he had replied, handing her the large mixing bowl she'd been reaching for. "But why should you when I'm here?" The problem was that he was always here, and Chloe was finding it increasingly difficult to remember why that should be a problem. This particular morning found her attempting to make his grandmother's apple pie, working from the delicate recipe card with its faded handwriting. She was concentrating so hard on getting the crust just right that she didn't hear Ethan enter the kitchen until his voice, warm with amusement, made her jump. "Do you have flour on your nose?" Chloe looked up to find him leaning against the counter, dressed in worn jeans and a flannel shirt rolled up at the sleeves. He must have been working outside. There was hay caught in his dark hair and dirt smudged on his jaw. He looked rugged and devastatingly handsome, and her heart did that annoying flutter it always did when she saw him. "I'm making your grandmother's pie," she said, fighting the urge to wipe at her nose, or attempting to. Her instructions are a bit cryptic in places. Ethan's expression softened. He moved closer, studying the recipe card over her shoulder. This close, she could smell earth and sweat, and something uniquely him that made her fingers clench in the pie dough. "She always said good crust required a light touch and cold hands," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Let me see yours." Before Chloe could process what he meant, Ethan gently took both her hands in his, examining them with such focused attention that her breath caught. His hands were so much larger than hers, rough with calluses but surprisingly gentle. "They're warm," he said, and there was something in his voice that made the observation feel intimate. "You've been working too hard." "That's my job," she managed, acutely aware that he was still holding her hands, his thumbs now tracing slow circles on her palms. "Here." Ethan released one hand but kept hold of the other, guiding her toward the sink. He turned on the cold water and held her hands under the stream, his larger ones cupping hers. "My grandmother used to do this. Said it helped keep the butter from melting into the dough." The gesture was simple, practical even, but the way Ethan was touching her, carefully, reverently, as if her hands were precious, made Chloe's throat tight. She watched water run over their joined hands, feeling the warmth of his chest against her back where he stood close behind her. "Better?" His voice was rough, strained. "Yes," she whispered, though she was talking about more than just her hands. Ethan turned off the water but didn't immediately release her. Instead, he reached for a dish towel and dried her hands, with such care that Chloe felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever treated her like this, like she was something delicate and valuable and worth cherishing. "Ethan," she began, but whatever she had been about to say was interrupted by his phone ringing. He closed his eyes briefly, frustration clear on his face, before pulling the device from his pocket. "I have to take this," he said apologetically, glancing at the screen. "It's my lawyer about the Henderson contract." "Of course. Go ahead." But Ethan hesitated, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. His thumb brushed away the flour on her nose, with such tenderness that it made her heart ache. "Will you save me a piece of the pie? It's your pie. I'll save you the whole thing if you want. I just want a piece." His eyes held hers. "The piece you cut for me. That's what matters." He left then, phone to his ear, but not before Chloe saw him glance back at her twice before he disappeared through the doorway. She returned to the pie with trembling hands, trying to focus on crimping the edges of the crust, while her mind replayed the feel of his hands on hers. The pie turned out perfectly. When Ethan appeared for dinner that evening, Chloe served him a generous slice, still warm from the oven. She watched from the kitchen doorway as he took the first bite, saw the way his eyes closed, and his expression transformed into something painful and beautiful. "It's perfect," he said when he opened his eyes, and she could see moisture gathering there. Exactly like hers. Later, when she was cleaning up the kitchen, Ethan appeared again. Without a word, he began helping her wash dishes, something she was certain the owner of a multi-million-dollar ranch had never done before in his life. "You don't have to do this," Chloe protested. "I want to." He took a plate from her hands and rinsed it carefully. "My grandmother used to say that washing dishes together was when the best conversations happened. Something about the rhythm of it. Hands busy so the words could flow easier." They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Ethan spoke again. "Tell me about your family. Your real family, not the polite version you give everyone else." Chloe considered deflecting but found herself answering honestly instead. "There's not much to tell. My parents are good people who work hard and never quite have enough. I have 3 younger siblings, 2 brothers and a sister. They're smart kids with big dreams and no money to chase them. That's why you send most of your paycheck home." "How did you—" She stopped, remembering Mrs. Patterson mentioning that he knew. "Yes. My sister wants to go to college. She's brilliant, but scholarships only cover so much." Ethan was quiet for a moment, scrubbing at a pot with more force than necessary. "What about your dreams, Chloe? What do you want?" No one had ever asked her that. She had spent so long putting her family's needs first that she had almost forgotten she was allowed to want things for herself. "I don't know," she admitted softly. "I used to dream about opening my own restaurant someday. Something small and cozy where people could come for comfort food and good conversation. But that was a long time ago. Why did you stop dreaming it?" "Because dreams require money and time and opportunities I don't have." She heard the bitterness in her own voice and tried to soften it. "It's okay, I'm good at what I do and I like helping my family." "That's enough." Ethan set down the pot he had been washing and turned to face her fully. His hands were still wet when he cupped her face, tilting it up so she had to meet his eyes. "It shouldn't have to be enough. You deserve to have your dreams too." "Ethan, I'm serious." His thumbs stroked her cheeks. "You're so busy taking care of everyone else that you've forgotten to take care of yourself. Your own wants, your own needs, your own future. And what would you know about that?" The question came out more defensive than she intended. "You've probably never had to sacrifice anything in your life." Instead of getting angry, Ethan just looked sad. You'd be surprised what I've sacrificed. He released her face but didn't step back. I inherited this ranch when I was 22. Had to give up college, give up friends, give up any chance at a normal life, because hundreds of people depended on me to keep this place running. I've spent 16 years building an empire and forgot to build a life. The raw honesty in his confession made Chloe's chest ache. She reached up tentatively and touched his jaw, feeling the stubble rough beneath her fingertips. You have a life. Look at everything you've built. I have a business. His hand covered hers, pressing it more firmly against his cheek. Until you walked into my kitchen, I didn't have a reason to come home at night. Didn't have someone whose smile made the whole day worthwhile. Didn't have someone I wanted to share my victories and defeats with. You barely know me, she whispered, but the protest was growing weaker each time she made it. Then let me know you better. Ethan's voice was urgent now, almost pleading. Have dinner with me. Not in the formal dining room with you serving, and me sitting alone like some lord of the manor. Real dinner. Just us talking, getting to know each other properly. That's not appropriate. I work for you. Then quit. Chloe blinked at him in shock. What? Quit being my cook and be my guest instead. He was completely serious, she realized with growing alarm. I'll hire someone else for the kitchen. You can stay in the house as my... No. She pulled her hand away from his face. No. I need this job, Ethan. My family needs this income. I can't just quit because we... She couldn't finish the sentence. The frustration on Ethan's face was palpable. His hands curled into fists at his sides, and she could practically see him wrestling with himself. Finally, he took a deep breath and stepped back, creating distance between them. You're right, I'm sorry, that was unfair of me. He ran a hand through his hair. Being around you and not being able to touch you, not being able to tell everyone that you're mine, it's driving me insane. I'm not yours, Chloe said, but her voice lacked conviction. Ethan's eyes met hers, dark and intense. Aren't you? The question hung in the air between them, unanswered because they both knew the truth. She was his, in every way that mattered, even if neither of them had said the words yet. And he was hers, this powerful man who looked at her like she hung the moon and stars. It was terrifying, it was exhilarating, and it was happening whether she was ready for it or not. The next morning brought an unexpected delivery. Chloe was preparing breakfast when Mrs. Patterson appeared in the kitchen doorway, with a knowing smile and a large cardboard box. This came for you, the older woman said, setting it on the counter. From a culinary supply company in the city. Chloe frowned, wiping her hands on her apron. I didn't order anything. The invoice says it's paid in full. Perhaps you should open it. Inside the box, carefully wrapped in tissue paper, was a complete set of professional chef's knives. The kind Chloe had only ever dreamed of owning. Each blade was perfectly balanced, the handles ergonomically designed, the steel gleaming. A small card was tucked among them, written in Ethan's bold handwriting. You deserve tools as exceptional as your talent. Chloe's hands trembled as she lifted one of the knives, feeling its perfect weight. These had to have cost a fortune. She couldn't possibly accept them. I need to talk to him, she said, already untying her apron. Mrs. Patterson's smile widened. He's in the east stable. But Chloe, whatever you're planning to say, maybe think about why he did it first. Chloe found Ethan exactly where Mrs. Patterson had said, examining a horse's hoof while talking to the stable manager. He looked up when she approached, and the pleasure that lit his face made her resolve waver. Chloe, this is a nice surprise. I can't accept these. She held up the knife she was still carrying, realizing too late how absurd she must look marching across his property, armed with cutlery. They're too expensive. Ethan straightened slowly, his expression shifting from pleasure to something more guarded. He dismissed the stable manager with a nod, waiting until they were alone before responding. They're tools for your work, tools you need. I have perfectly good knives. You have adequate knives. He moved closer, his boots crunching on the hay-strewn floor. I've watched you work with them. They're dull and poorly balanced. You deserve better. That's not your decision to make, isn't it? A hint of challenge entered his voice. You work for me. If I want to provide my staff with proper equipment, don't. Chloe cut him off, anger flaring. Don't pretend this is about me being your employee. We both know it's more than that. Ethan's jaw clenched. You're right. It's not about you being my employee. It's about me wanting to give you things, to make your life easier, to see you smile when you unwrap something I chose specifically for you. I can't accept expensive gifts from you. It's not right. Why not? He took another step closer, close enough now that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Because of what people might think, because it blurs the lines between employer and employee, or because accepting them means acknowledging that something is happening between us. Chloe's grip tightened on the knife handle. All of those reasons. Then send them back. Ethan's voice was rough with frustration. Give them to charity. Throw them in the trash for all I care. But know that I'll just buy you something else and something else after that. Because taking care of you, making sure you have what you need, it's become as necessary to me as breathing. That's not healthy, Ethan. I know. He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly vulnerable. I know it's not. I know I'm probably scaring you with how intense this is, but I don't know how to dial it back. I've never felt like this before, and I don't have a roadmap for how to handle it. The honesty in his confession deflated Chloe's anger. She lowered the knife, suddenly aware of how ridiculous this whole confrontation was. You can't just buy me things every time you feel something. Then tell me what I can do. Ethan's hands came up as if to touch her, then dropped back to his sides. Tell me how to show you that you matter to me without overstepping, because right now I'm fumbling in the dark here. Chloe sighed, feeling her resistance crumble. The knives are beautiful. And yes, they're better than what I have. But Ethan, I need you to understand I'm not with you because of what you can give me materially. You're not with me at all, he pointed out, but there was hope in his eyes. At least not officially. No, she agreed softly. I'm not. They stood there in the quiet stable, sunlight streaming through the gaps in the wooden walls, dust motes dancing in the golden beams. A horse snorted in a nearby stall, and somewhere outside ranch hands called to each other. It was a perfectly ordinary moment, except for the extraordinary tension crackling between them. Keep the knives, Ethan said finally. Please. Not because I bought them, but because they'll make your work easier and safer. Let me do this one thing. Chloe nodded, knowing it was a small concession, but feeling like she was surrendering something larger. Okay, but no more expensive gifts. Define expensive. The corner of his mouth quirked up. Ethan, I'm serious. Is a cup of the coffee you like expensive? What about those strawberries you mentioned preferring for your morning pastries? Where's the line, Chloe? She couldn't help but smile at his deliberate obtuseness. You know what I mean. Do I? He was grinning now, and the transformation was remarkable. It softened his harsh features, made him look younger, almost boyish. Because I'm already planning to order that specialty vanilla extract I heard you mention to Mrs. Patterson. Ethan Callahan, you were eavesdropping. I was strategically gathering information. His eyes sparkled with mischief. There's a difference. Before Chloe could respond, her foot caught on an uneven board, and she stumbled forward. Ethan's arms came around her instantly, catching her against his chest with such quick reflexes that she barely had time to gasp. The knife fell harmlessly to the hay-covered floor as both her hands came up to grip his shoulders for balance. Careful, he murmured, but he made no move to release her. If anything, his arms tightened around her waist, holding her securely against him. Chloe was acutely aware of everywhere their bodies touched. Her hands on his shoulders, his arms around her waist, her chest pressed against his. She could feel the solid warmth of him, could smell leather and hay and that uniquely masculine scent that was pure Ethan. You can let go now, she whispered, but she didn't pull away. I don't want to. His voice was rough, strained. Holding you is the best thing that's happened to me all week. That's sad. That's honest. One of his hands moved to the small of her back, splaying possessively. You have no idea how many times I've imagined this. Having you in my arms. Feeling you trust me enough to let me hold you. Chloe's breath caught. She should step back, should re-establish boundaries, should remember all the reasons this was complicated. But when she looked up at him, what she saw in his eyes made all those sensible thoughts scatter. I should get back to the kitchen, she managed. Breakfast won't make itself. In a minute. Ethan's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw with such tenderness that her eyes fluttered closed. Let me have this minute, Chloe. Please. So she stayed there in the circle of his arms, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady against her own, letting him hold her as if she were something precious he was afraid of breaking. And for just that moment, She allowed herself to imagine what it would be like if this were real, if she were truly his and he were truly hers, without complications or power dynamics or fear holding them back. When she finally pulled away, Ethan released her immediately, though the reluctance in the gesture was clear. He bent to retrieve the fallen knife, cleaning it carefully on his shirt before handing it back to her. "Thank you," she said softly, "for the knives. Really, you're welcome." His eyes held hers. "And Chloe, that vanilla extract is already ordered. Should arrive tomorrow." She laughed despite herself, shaking her head as she turned to leave. "You're impossible. Only when it comes to you." As Chloe walked back to the house, the knife cradled carefully in her hands and Ethan's gaze burning into her back, she realized with startling clarity that she was falling for him. Not just attracted, not just fascinated, falling in that terrifying, exhilarating way that meant there would be no protecting her heart if this went wrong. And the most frightening part was that she couldn't seem to make herself care about the risk. Behind her, Ethan stood in the stable doorway watching until she disappeared into the house, his hand pressed against his chest as if he could calm his racing heart through sheer force of will. The stable manager returned and found him still standing there, staring at the empty path with an expression of such longing that the older man wisely said nothing at all. 3 weeks into her employment, Chloe's world had narrowed to one undeniable truth. Ethan Callahan was consuming her thoughts as thoroughly as she apparently consumed his. The evidence was everywhere. The way he rearranged his entire schedule just to be in the kitchen during her morning prep work, how he had quietly dismissed Tommy from any duties that brought him near the house after catching the young ranch hand complimenting her biscuits. The fact that he now personally drove her home every single night, regardless of how late she worked, and lingered at her door as if leaving her was physically painful. Tonight was no different. A summer storm had rolled in during dinner service, and rain drummed against the windows as Chloe finished cleaning the kitchen. When she texted Ethan that she was ready, his response came within seconds. "Don't move. I'm getting the truck." She waited by the kitchen door, watching lightning fork across the darkened sky. The storm was magnificent and terrifying, nature's raw power on full display. She was so absorbed in watching it that she didn't hear Ethan approach until his jacket settled around her shoulders, still warm from his body. "You'll catch cold," he said, his voice rough with concern. Chloe pulled the jacket tighter, breathing in his scent. "It's summer. You're shivering." He was right. But it wasn't from the cold. It was from his proximity, from the way his hand lingered on her shoulder, from the intensity she could feel radiating from him even in the darkness. "The truck's right outside," Ethan continued, but he made no move toward the door. Instead, his hand slid from her shoulder down her arm, his fingers eventually tangling with hers. "Ready?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. They ran through the rain together, his hand never leaving hers, and by the time they reached the truck they were both soaked. Ethan helped her into the passenger seat, his hands spanning her waist, lifting her easily. The gesture was practical, but felt unbearably intimate. Inside the truck, with rain hammering the roof and windows fogging from their breath, the world shrank to just the two of them. Ethan made no move to start the engine. Instead, he turned to her, and in the intermittent flashes of lightning, she could see the war playing out on his face. "I need to tell you something," he said finally, his voice barely audible over the storm. Chloe's heart kicked against her ribs. "Okay. I can't keep pretending this is normal. That what I feel for you is normal." His hands gripped the steering wheel as if it were the only thing keeping him grounded. "Every night I drop you off and watch you walk away, it gets harder to leave. Every morning I wake up and the first thing I think about is whether you slept well, if you're happy, if you dreamed about me the way I dream about you." "Ethan, let me finish. Please." He turned to face her fully, and the raw emotion in his eyes stole her breath. "I know this is fast. I know I'm probably overwhelming you, but I need you to understand. This isn't just attraction. This isn't just wanting you in my bed, though God knows I do. This is something deeper. Something that scares the hell out of me because I've never felt it before." Chloe's throat tightened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'm falling for you." His voice cracked on the words. "Maybe I've already fallen. And I know that puts you in an impossible position because you work for me, because there's a power imbalance, because this complicates everything. But I can't keep it inside anymore." The confession hung between them, as powerful as the storm raging outside. Chloe stared at him, this strong, commanding man who ran a multi-million-dollar empire, now looking utterly vulnerable in the flickering lightning. "I don't know what to say," she whispered honestly. "Then don't say anything." Ethan's hand reached out tentatively, cupping her cheek. "Just tell me I'm not alone in this. Tell me you feel even a fraction of what I feel, and I'll find a way to make this work. We'll find a way together." Chloe leaned into his touch, her own hand coming up to cover his. "You're not alone," she admitted, and watched relief flood his features. "I think about you constantly. Wonder what you're doing, if you're eating properly, if you're pushing yourself too hard. When you walk into a room, it's like all the oxygen disappears. And when you look at me the way you're looking at me right now, how am I looking at you? Like I'm something miraculous." Her voice broke. "Like I matter more than anything else in the world. You do." Ethan's thumb stroked her cheekbone with infinite tenderness. "You matter more than this ranch, more than my business, more than anything I've built. And that terrifies me, because I've spent my entire adult life making sure nothing and no one could become more important than my responsibilities." "But," Chloe prompted softly, "but then you walked into my life with flour on your nose and determination in your eyes, and suddenly all those responsibilities felt meaningless compared to making you smile." He leaned closer, his forehead almost touching hers. "What have you done to me, Chloe Harrington?" "The same thing you've done to me," she whispered back. They stayed like that, breathing the same air, hearts pounding in unison, while the storm raged around them. Ethan's hand trembled against her cheek, and Chloe could feel the restraint it was costing him not to close that final distance between them. "I should take you home," he said finally, though he didn't move. "You should." "In a minute." "In a minute," she agreed. But several minutes passed before Ethan finally, reluctantly started the truck. And when he walked her to her door, his hand warm and protective at the small of her back, Chloe knew with absolute certainty that they had crossed a line tonight. There was no going back now, not that she wanted to. The next morning brought an unexpected shift in dynamics. When Chloe arrived in the kitchen before dawn, she found a single wildflower in a glass vase on her workstation, a delicate purple bloom she recognized from the fields surrounding the ranch. There was no note, but none was needed. She smiled, touching the soft petals gently before beginning her work. Throughout the morning, more flowers appeared, one tucked behind the coffee canister, another beside the recipe box. By noon, she had collected 7, each one carefully placed where she would find it during her routine. It was silly and romantic, and made her heart feel too big for her chest. "He picked those himself this morning," Mrs. Patterson said, appearing with her usual quiet timing. "I saw him from the upstairs window walking through the east field at sunrise with his grandmother's cutting basket." The image of Ethan, powerful, commanding Ethan, carefully selecting wildflowers for her, made Chloe's throat tight with emotion. "He's never done anything like this before," the housekeeper continued, studying Chloe with those sharp eyes. "Never brought a woman flowers, never rearranged his schedule for anyone, never looked at someone the way he looks at you. Mrs. Patterson, I'm not warning you off, dear." The older woman's expression softened. "Just the opposite. I'm telling you that what you have with him is rare, real, the kind of thing people spend their whole lives searching for." She paused. "But I'm also telling you to be careful. There are people on this ranch who won't be happy about it." "What people?" Before Mrs. Patterson could answer, James Whitmore, the ranch administrator, strode into the kitchen. He was a lean man in his mid-40s with cold eyes and a perpetual sneer that made Chloe instinctively uncomfortable. "Mrs. Patterson, I need you to—" He stopped when he saw Chloe, his gaze sweeping over her dismissively before landing on the flowers scattered across the counter. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition. Calculation. "New decoration policy in the kitchen." "Those are mine," Chloe said, fighting the urge to gather them protectively. "How nice." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Callahan is certainly providing his staff with lovely perks these days." The way he said it made the innocent statement sound sordid. Chloe felt her cheeks heat, but before she could respond, Mrs. Patterson stepped forward. "Was there something you needed, Mr. Whitmore?" "Just the quarterly staffing reports." He pulled his gaze from Chloe with obvious effort. "By tomorrow, please." After he left, Chloe released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "He gives me chills." "He's been with the ranch for 10 years, Mrs. Patterson said carefully. always resented that Ethan's grandmother never trusted him with more responsibility. And now, seeing Ethan's attention focused on you instead of business, she trailed off meaningfully. You think he'd cause problems? I think James Whitmore is the kind of man who sees opportunity in other people's happiness. The older woman's expression was grave. Just be aware of him, dear, and be careful what you leave lying around where he might see it. The warning stayed with Chloe throughout the day, casting a shadow over her earlier joy. That evening, when Ethan appeared for dinner, she studied him with new eyes, seeing not just the man who made her heart race, but the powerful ranch owner whose every move was watched and analyzed by dozens of employees. You're quiet tonight, Ethan observed when she served his meal. His hand brushed hers deliberately, and the contact sent warmth through her despite her troubled thoughts. Something wrong? Just tired, she lied, not wanting to burden him with her worries. But Ethan knew her too well already. His eyes narrowed and she watched him make a visible decision not to push. I have some paperwork to finish, but I'll be done by 9. Wait for me? It wasn't really a question. They both knew she would wait, just as they both knew he would drop everything if she truly needed him. This unspoken understanding between them was growing stronger every day, binding them together in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. I'll wait, she agreed softly. Later, as she cleaned the kitchen and watched darkness fall outside the windows, Chloe found herself thinking about Mrs. Patterson's warning, about James Whitmore's calculating eyes, about the complications of falling for a man whose world was so different from her own. But when Ethan appeared at 9 exactly, still in his work clothes with exhaustion etched on his face, and his expression transformed into pure joy at the sight of her, when he crossed the kitchen and pulled her into his arms without a word, just holding her as if she were his anchor in a storm, all those worries faded into insignificance. Long day, she murmured against his chest. Better now. His lips pressed against her hair. How you make everything better. And standing there in his arms, feeling safe and cherished and completely undone, Chloe couldn't bring herself to care about the consequences. Whatever came next, they would face it together. She just hoped that would be enough. The afternoon rain had trapped Chloe in the main house, and with no dinner guests scheduled, she found herself with unexpected free time. She was organizing the pantry when Ethan appeared, soaked from his ride back from the south pasture. "You're wet," she said, stating the obvious as water dripped from his hair onto the kitchen floor. Observant. His eyes sparkled with amusement, despite his drenched state. The storm came up faster than expected. Chloe grabbed a dish towel without thinking, moving to him and reaching up to dry his face. The gesture was intimate, domestic, and she froze halfway through when she realized what she was doing. But Ethan's hand came up to cover hers, holding the towel and her hand against his cheek. "Don't stop," he said softly. So she didn't. She carefully dried his face, then his neck, acutely aware of his gaze never leaving her. When she moved to his hair, he had to bend down to accommodate her height, bringing their faces close enough that she could count his eyelashes. "Chloe," he murmured, and there was such longing in that single word. "Ethan, we shouldn't—" "I know." But his hands found her waist, pulling her closer. "I know we shouldn't, but I'm tired of fighting this. Tired of pretending I don't want to kiss you every time I see you." Her breath caught. "You think about kissing me?" "Constantly." His forehead touched hers. "I think about how your lips would feel, how you'd taste, whether you'd sigh or pull away or—" A loud crash from somewhere in the house made them spring apart. Mrs. Patterson's voice called out an apology for dropping a vase, and the moment shattered. "I should change," Ethan said, his voice rough with frustration. After he left, Chloe stood alone in the kitchen, her heart racing and her lips tingling from proximity alone. This was getting dangerous. They were getting too close, too fast, and she was losing her ability to think clearly around him. Later that evening, as she prepared to leave, she remembered leaving her phone in the office where she had been reviewing supply orders. The main house was quiet, most of the staff having gone home. She made her way through the dimly lit hallway, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. The office door was ajar, light spilling into the hallway. She pushed it open, expecting to find it empty, but instead found James Whitmore sitting at Ethan's desk, shuffling through papers. "Mr. Whitmore," Chloe's voice made him jump. "What are you doing?" "Working late," he said smoothly, but his eyes were cold. "As some of us must do to keep this ranch running." The implication was clear. While she was distracting Ethan, real work was being neglected. Chloe felt her cheeks heat. "I just need to get my phone," she said, spotting it on a side table. "Of course." Whitmore stood, gathering his papers. "Though I must say it's interesting how often you seem to need things from Mr. Callahan's private spaces. I was reviewing supply orders earlier. I'm sure you were." His smile was unpleasant. "Just as I'm sure Mr. Callahan has been very accommodating of your needs." Chloe grabbed her phone and fled, his knowing laughter following her down the hallway. She texted Ethan that she was ready to leave, trying to shake off the encounter. When Ethan arrived to drive her home, he took one look at her face and frowned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Just tired." But as they drove through the darkness, Chloe couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Whitmore's presence in Ethan's office, his insinuating comments, the way he had been shuffling through papers, it all felt wrong somehow. "Ethan," she said carefully, "do you trust James Whitmore?" His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Why do you ask?" "I found him in your office tonight, alone." Ethan's jaw clenched. "He has access to my office for administrative purposes, but I'll admit, I've had concerns about him lately. He's been acting strangely, asking questions about things that aren't his business." "What kind of things?" "About you, mostly." Ethan glanced at her. "About how much time we spend together, whether you're settling in well. He seems overly interested." A chill ran down Chloe's spine, but she pushed it aside. She was probably being paranoid. If only she had known how right her instincts were. The documents appeared on Chloe's workstation 3 days later, tucked beneath her recipe binder. She almost missed them, but the edge of a manila folder caught her eye as she reached for flour. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were printed emails, financial records, and what appeared to be internal memos, all bearing Ethan's name and signature. Her eyes scanned the pages, and with each line her blood ran colder. Regarding the Richardson matter, ensure he understands silence is not optional. Handle the Mason situation permanently. I don't want him causing problems again. Transfer to the northern property was insufficient. Make sure he can't return. There were more, pages of them, each more damning than the last. References to people who had disappeared, to problems being eliminated, to ensuring certain individuals understood the consequences of crossing Ethan Callahan. Chloe's vision swam. This couldn't be real. Not her Ethan, who picked wildflowers and dried her hands so tenderly and looked at her like she was everything. But the documents looked authentic. His signature was unmistakable. And suddenly, all his possessive behavior took on a sinister cast. The way he had dismissed Tommy so harshly, how he always knew where she was, his intensity about walking her home every night. You make sure his family understands. Their best option is to forget he existed. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. She thought of his grandmother's stories about Callahan men loving fiercely. What if fierce had a darker meaning? What if the power she had found so attractive was actually dangerous? Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Miss you. Coming to the kitchen soon." Chloe's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. She couldn't face him. Not now. Not with these documents burning into her brain and fear clawing at her throat. She grabbed her bag with trembling fingers, stuffing the folder inside. She needed to think, needed space, needed to understand if the man she was falling in love with was actually a monster. The walk to the staff quarters felt like miles. Every shadow made her jump, every sound made her heart race. She threw her belongings into her duffel bag, her movements jerky and panicked. A knock on the door made her freeze. "Chloe, are you in there?" Ethan's voice, concerned and gentle. The voice that had whispered such sweet things to her. She couldn't answer, couldn't face him. "Chloe, you're scaring me. Please open the door." Tears streamed down her face as she scribbled a note with shaking hands. "I can't do this. I can't be with someone like you. Please don't come after me." She waited until she heard his footsteps retreat before slipping out the back way. A ranch hand she barely knew agreed to drive her to the bus station in exchange for $50, half of what she had. During the entire drive, she kept looking back, half expecting to see Ethan's truck pursuing them. But the road remained empty. At the bus station, waiting for the midnight bus to her hometown, Chloe finally let herself sob. She pulled out her phone to delete his number, to sever the connection cleanly, but found herself staring at their text thread instead. His last message, "Miss you, coming to the kitchen soon." Before that, "Sleep well, dream of me." And before that, "You make everything better." She had been so happy, so completely, foolishly happy, and now she was running for her life from the man she loved. The bus pulled up, its brakes hissing in the quiet night. Chloe boarded with her small bag and broken heart, never looking back at the town that held everything she had wanted and everything she feared. She had no way of knowing that in the morning, Ethan would find her note and fall to his knees in his empty kitchen, clutching the paper and sobbing her name. She had no way of knowing the documents were all lies, and she had no way of knowing that the man who planted them was watching her bus disappear with a satisfied smile. Ethan read the note for the 100th time, the paper crumpled and tear-stained. 4 days had passed since Chloe vanished, and each minute felt like drowning. Someone like you. What did that mean? He had replayed every conversation, every moment, searching for the mistake that had driven her away. Had he been too intense? Too possessive? Had he scared her with the depth of his feelings? His ranch suffered. Meetings went unattended. Calls went unreturned. His staff walked on eggshells around him, watching their employer deteriorate before their eyes. Mrs. Patterson found him in the kitchen late one night, sitting in the dark where Chloe used to work. "You need to eat, Mr. Callahan." "I need her." His voice was broken. "I need to understand what I did wrong. Maybe you should ask her family where she is." "I tried. They won't see me. Her father threatened to call the police if I came back." Ethan's laugh was bitter, like I'm some kind of threat to her. But Mrs. Patterson was studying him with those sharp eyes. "What if someone made her think you were? What? What if something happened to make her afraid of you?" The housekeeper moved closer. "Think, Mr. Callahan. What could make a woman who looked at you the way Chloe did suddenly run in terror?" Ethan's mind raced. Chloe hadn't been afraid of him. Even at his most intense, she had met his gaze steadily, had challenged him, had softened under his touch. Fear had never been in her eyes when she looked at him. Until that last day. He had seen her in the morning, had watched her smile at his text. Then nothing. No explanation, just that note. "Someone told her something," he said slowly, "or showed her something. The question is, who and what?" Mrs. Patterson hesitated. "I've worked here 30 years, Mr. Callahan. I know when something isn't right. Tell me. James Whitmore has been acting strange, asking questions about Miss Harrington, watching her. The day she left, I saw him near the staff quarters." Rage, white-hot and pure, flooded through Ethan. "Why didn't you tell me? I'm telling you now." She met his anger calmly. "What are you going to do about it?" What happened next was swift and brutal. Ethan confronted Whitmore in his office at dawn, blocking the door and demanding answers. The administrator tried to bluff, but Ethan had spent 20 years reading people in business deals. He knew when someone was lying. "What did you tell her?" Ethan's voice was deadly quiet. "I don't know what did you tell her?" The roar echoed through the house. Whitmore's facade cracked. Nothing she didn't need to know about the man she was sleeping with. Ethan grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against the wall. "I never touched her, never disrespected her, so I'll ask you one more time. What lies did you feed her?" The truth came out in pieces. Documents, fake emails, suggestions that Ethan eliminated people who crossed him, all carefully crafted to look authentic, planted where Chloe would find them. "Why?" Ethan's voice shook with fury. "Because you were weak," Whitmore spat. "Distracted. Useless. She was ruining you, making you soft. I did this ranch a favor." Ethan released him so abruptly that Whitmore stumbled. "You're fired. You have 1 hour to clear out before I have you arrested for fraud and harassment. You can't prove. I record everything in this office. Every conversation, every confession." Ethan's smile was cold. "Including this one. Get out of my sight before I forget I'm not the monster you made her think I was." After Whitmore fled, Ethan collapsed into his chair and buried his face in his hands. He had the truth now, had evidence of the manipulation. But would it be enough? Would Chloe believe him? Or had Whitmore's poison done permanent damage? There was only one way to find out. Chloe's mother found her crying in the kitchen for the 4th morning in a row. "Baby, you need to talk to someone." "I'm fine, Mama." "You're not fine. You haven't been fine since you came home." Her mother sat down, taking her hand. "Does this have to do with Mr. Callahan?" The name alone made Chloe's chest ache. "I don't want to talk about him. He came here, you know, 3 days ago. Your father sent him away, but Chloe, that man looked destroyed. Whatever happened between you, he's suffering too." "He's dangerous, Mama." I saw documents. Did you? Her mother's voice was gentle but firm. Or did you see papers that someone wanted you to see? Before Chloe could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Her father answered, and she heard a woman's voice, Mrs. Patterson. I need to speak with Chloe. Please. It's important. Chloe emerged from the kitchen, shock rendering her speechless. Mrs. Patterson stood on the porch, looking tired but determined, holding a thick envelope. May I come in? They sat in the small living room, Chloe's parents hovering protectively. Mrs. Patterson opened the envelope, pulling out documents. These are the real emails from those dates, she said, spreading them on the coffee table, the ones James Whitmore forged. Chloe's hands trembled as she read. The names were the same, but the content was completely different. Richardson had been given a generous severance package after retirement. Mason had transferred to another property at his own request for family reasons. The northern property transfer had been a promotion. He manipulated everything, Mrs. Patterson continued. Changed words, fabricated signatures. We found the originals in his personal files after Mr. Callahan confronted him. Chloe's voice was barely a whisper. Whitmore confessed everything. It's all recorded. He planted those documents to drive you away because he thought you were making Mr. Callahan weak. The housekeeper's eyes were kind but serious. He succeeded. Ethan hasn't eaten properly in days, hasn't slept. He's falling apart without you. Tears streamed down Chloe's face as the truth crashed over her. I believed it. I believed he was dangerous. Because Whitmore made it believable. Mrs. Patterson pulled out one more document, a recording device. Ethan wanted you to hear this, to understand that he would never hurt you or anyone else. She pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room, raw with pain. Tell her I love her. Tell her I would never harm her, never threaten her, never be anything but grateful that she exists. Tell her that if she can't come back to me, I understand. But she needs to know the truth. She needs to know that loving her is the best thing I've ever done, and losing her is killing me. Chloe's sob broke the silence. Her mother wrapped arms around her as she wept. What do I do? Chloe whispered. What does your heart tell you? Her heart told her she had been a fool, that she had run from the best thing in her life based on lies, that somewhere in that big ranch house, Ethan was suffering as much as she was. I need to see him. Mesnam? Patterson smiled. He's waiting. He's been waiting since the moment you left. The drive back to the ranch felt eternal. Chloe clutched the real documents, evidence of her mistake and his innocence. What if he couldn't forgive her for doubting him? What if she had broken something irreparable? But when Mrs. Patterson's car pulled up to the main house and Chloe saw Ethan on the porch, thinner, haggard, but alive with desperate hope, all her fears vanished. She was out of the car before it fully stopped, running toward him. Ethan met her halfway, and when their bodies collided, when his arms wrapped around her with desperate strength, Chloe finally felt like she could breathe again. I'm sorry, she sobbed against his chest. I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you. Shh. His hand cradled her head. You're here. That's all that matters. I love you, she whispered. I love you so much. Ethan pulled back just enough to see her face, his own wet with tears. Say it again. I love you. And then he was kissing her. The kiss was everything Chloe had imagined and nothing she could have prepared for. Ethan's lips claimed hers with a desperate hunger, tempered by infinite tenderness. One hand cupping her face while the other pressed firmly against the small of her back, holding her against him as if he feared she might disappear again. Chloe melted into him, her fingers threading through his hair as she kissed him back with equal fervor. She tasted salt from their mingled tears, felt the tremor in his strong hands, heard the groan that rumbled deep in his chest when she pressed closer. Chloe, he breathed against her lips, pulling back just enough to look at her. His eyes were dark with emotion, searching her face as if memorizing every detail. I thought I'd lost you forever. Never, she whispered. I'm so sorry I ran. Sorry I didn't trust. He silenced her with another kiss, this one slower, deeper, speaking of forgiveness and promises, and a love too powerful for words. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Come inside, Ethan murmured, his forehead resting against hers. Please, I need to hold you properly, need to know this is real. She nodded, and he took her hand, lacing their fingers together as he led her into the house. The staff had discreetly vanished, leaving them alone in the vast space that suddenly felt intimate and sacred. In the living room, Ethan pulled her onto the sofa, settling her on his lap and wrapping both arms around her, as if he couldn't bear even an inch of distance. Chloe curled into his chest, listening to the steady thunder of his heartbeat. "Tell me everything," she said softly. "What happened after I left?" So he did. He told her about the sleepless nights, the meals he couldn't eat, the way her absence had carved a hole in his chest. He told her about confronting Whitmore, about discovering the elaborate deception, about the recordings and evidence that proved his innocence. "I would never hurt you," Ethan said, his voice fierce. "Never. The thought of you being afraid of me nearly destroyed me. I know that now." Chloe lifted her head to meet his gaze. "I know who you really are. A good man. A protective man, someone who loves deeply and completely. Only with you." His hand came up to stroke her hair. "I've never felt this before, Chloe. This consuming need to make someone happy, to protect them, to build a life with them. Is that what you want? A life with me?" "More than anything." Ethan's eyes held hers with unwavering certainty. "I want mornings waking up beside you, evenings cooking together, nights falling asleep with you in my arms. I want everything, Chloe. All of it. Forever." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I want that too." The kiss that followed was different from before, less desperate, more certain, a claiming and a surrender all at once. Ethan's hands traced reverent paths along her spine, and Chloe felt heat bloom where he touched, spreading through her body like wildfire. "Stay with me tonight," he whispered against her lips. "Not in the staff quarters, here, with me." Chloe's breath caught. She knew what he was asking, knew what staying meant. And she wanted it, wanted him, with an intensity that left no room for doubt. "Yes," she breathed. Ethan stood, lifting her effortlessly in his arms. She wrapped her legs around his waist, her arms around his neck, as he carried her through the house to his private rooms. With every step he kissed her, her lips, her jaw, the sensitive spot beneath her ear that made her gasp. In his bedroom, he set her down gently on the bed, following her down until he was braced above her, his weight supported on his forearms. The lamplight cast shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp planes and the raw emotion in his eyes. "I love you," he said, the words a vow. "I will spend every day proving that to you." "I love you too," Chloe whispered, pulling him down for another kiss. And as the night deepened around them, they spoke their love in whispers and sighs, in gentle touches and passionate embraces, discovering each other with reverence and wonder, building something beautiful and unbreakable that would last a lifetime. Morning light filtered through the curtains, painting golden stripes across the tangled sheets. Chloe woke slowly, aware first of warmth, then of the solid presence beside her, then of the gentle fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "Good morning." Ethan's voice was rough with sleep and emotion. She turned to face him, finding his eyes already on her, filled with such tenderness that her throat tightened. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi, yourself." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "How do you feel?" "Perfect." And she meant it. Last night had been everything she had dreamed and more, gentle and passionate, reverent and wild, two souls finally coming together without barriers or fear. "You, like the luckiest man alive." His hand cupped her face. "I meant what I said, every word. I want forever with you, Chloe. Then you'll have it." They stayed in bed for hours, talking and laughing and discovering the simple joy of being together without complications. When Mrs. Patterson knocked discreetly with breakfast, they ate in bed like teenagers, feeding each other strawberries and stealing kisses between bites. The next 3 months were a dream. Chloe moved into the main house, into Ethan's room, into his life completely. They cooked together in the evenings, him learning her recipes while she learned his stories. He taught her to ride horses. She taught him to make pie crust from scratch. The ranch had never seen its owner so happy, so present, so completely transformed by love. On a crisp autumn evening, with stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky, Ethan led her to the field where he had picked those first wildflowers. A blanket was spread on the grass, candles flickering in glass jars surrounding it. "What's this?" Chloe asked, though her heart already knew. Ethan took both her hands, his own trembling slightly. 3 months ago, you ran from me because someone made you believe I was dangerous. But you came back, you trusted me, you chose me despite everything." "Ethan," Let me finish. He smiled, though his eyes were suspiciously bright. You've taught me what love really means. Not control, but freedom. Not possession, but partnership. You've shown me that being strong means being vulnerable with the right person. He dropped to one knee, and Chloe's hands flew to her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. Chloe Harrington, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you, protecting you, and making you as happy as you've made me? The ring he produced was perfect, a simple diamond that caught the candlelight and threw rainbows across her skin. Not ostentatious, just beautiful, just right. Yes, she sobbed. Yes, yes, yes. Ethan slipped the ring on her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms and spinning her around while she laughed through her tears. When he finally set her down, he kissed her with such joy that she felt it in her very soul. The wedding took place on the ranch 3 months later, a beautiful blend of his world and hers. Chloe's family mixed easily with Ethan's business associates, her mother crying happy tears as she watched her daughter marry a man who looked at her like she hung the moon. During the ceremony, when Ethan promised to love and cherish her all the days of his life, his voice broke with emotion. And when Chloe promised to trust him, to build a life with him, to love him forever, she meant every word with her whole heart. Their first dance was to a slow country song his grandmother had loved, and Ethan held her so close she could feel his heartbeat against her own. Happy, he murmured. Deliriously. Good. He kissed her temple. Because this is just the beginning. 2 years later, the kitchen of the main house, now renovated and expanded with Chloe's input, smelled of cinnamon and fresh bread. Chloe stood at the counter, her swollen belly making it difficult to reach the upper shelves, humming contentedly as she worked. Strong arms wrapped around her from behind, large hands splaying protectively over her rounded stomach. What are you doing? Making cookies for the ranch hands' families, Chloe said, leaning back into Ethan's embrace. It's almost Christmas. You're 8 months pregnant with twins. You should be resting. I'm happy. I'm cooking. I'm exactly where I want to be. She turned in his arms, smiling up at him. Stop fussing. I'll never stop fussing over you. He kissed her nose, especially now. Well, your children are very active today. As if on cue, one of the babies kicked, and Ethan's face lit up with wonder as his hand followed the movement. They're going to be strong like their mother, he said softly, and stubborn like their father. They stood together, swaying gently, hands on her belly, feeling their children move. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the ranch in white. Inside, surrounded by warmth and love and the promise of the family they were building, Chloe and Ethan held each other close. I love you, he whispered. I love you too, always. The twins arrived 6 weeks later during a golden afternoon in January, a boy and a girl, both healthy and perfect. When Ethan held them for the first time, tears streaming down his face as he looked from his children to his wife, Chloe knew they had created something beautiful from the ashes of fear and manipulation. They had built a love story worth fighting for, a family worth protecting, a future worth living. And as Ethan carefully placed one baby in each of her arms and kissed her forehead with infinite tenderness, Chloe knew without doubt that she was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of the man who had loved her, fierce enough to let her go and patient enough to wait for her to come back. Their story was just beginning. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support makes all the difference.